Welcome to Accounting on Automation, the Future of Modern Accounting podcast. If you're tired of endless spreadsheets, mundane month-end tasks, and manual workflows, you're in the right place. This is the podcast where we ditch the busy work and explore how automation is transforming modern accounting. From solutions that reconcile faster than you can say pivot table to AI that gives you insights before your coffee cools, we're uncovering accounting's best-kept automation secrets. I'm M. Daigle, founder and Chief Automation Officer of OTTO-MATES, a community for accountants focused on automation. Join me as we chat with finance innovators, tech trailblazers, and the occasional spreadsheet survivor to uncover how AI and automation are reshaping the numbers game. Because in a world of automation, the only thing you should be handling manually is your morning latte. Let's automate. Hey, everyone. I am so excited to introduce Nick G. I'm going to say G. I'm not even going to attempt the last name at the risk of embarrassing myself. Nick is the SVP of Finance at Cornerstone OnDemand, and I'm so excited to have him join me on this episode of Accounting on Automation podcast brought to you by Hubify. So, Nick, before we jump in, first things first, how do I pronounce your last name properly?
Sure, it's Gerostathos. It's just a hard G. So
see, I would have already,
yeah.
I'm glad I didn't even
people call me Nick.
Okay, Nick. Yeah. I kind of think Nick G's got a ring to it, but Nick it is. Okay, so you have you've led finance teams at some really fast-moving, very tech-forward companies. I had the pleasure of meeting you back when you were at TalkDesk, and now you're at Cornerstone. Would love if you could walk the listeners just through your career path
Sure.
and how you got into the role you're in at Cornerstone today.
Yeah, I think happy to do so. Like most people in this profession, I was fortunate to start off with Big Four. So I was a legacy PwC guy, and I'll probably break down my career in terms of like the fundamental, the operational, and then the transformational. So fundamentally, I was with 13 years with PwC, and you learn everything under the sun in terms of technical accounting. I spent 5, almost 6 years with global capital markets, helping companies go public. So that really teaches you how to understand SEC requirements, acquisition accounting, and every technical bit of accounting from RevRec to stock comp to divestitures that you can understand. And when I left public, I got into what I call operational, and I spent the next 10 years working for large multinational companies, global companies, Anheuser-Busch InBev, MasterCard, to name a few. MasterCard was about 7-8 billion at the time I joined them. Anheuser-Busch was around 50 billion. And now you learn like how to actually close books at scale, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're working with large public, you kind of learn best practice, you kind of learn how to move a bigger ship, and you kind of learn how to kind of navigate the intricacies of a large organization to basically get, an org to do things they probably don't want to do when it comes to like compliance, SEC compliance and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then the last 10, 12 years now, as if I count the years, I decided to make my life challenging by, getting into this VC/PE game, right? And so for the last 12 years, I've done everything from small startup, $10 million, doing financials in whole dollars and try to scale an org and prove out a business model, to PE-backed enterprise level, where you're trying to work out an exit and trying to scale and grow through acquisition and organic growth, to larger enterprise PE-backed, where you're just trying to do, fundamental accounting, changing in business model practices, working in a founder-led organization and trying to help them scale to go public. So I've done the gamut, and right now I got back into the PE game, working with Clearlake to try to help, one of their portfolio companies, grow and expand and hit their financial targets. So it's been I love this space because you get more into the business, right? Mm-hmm. Get more into understanding the tech space, and it's all been in tech and how it all works and how all the departments come together. And I've done everything from controllership roles to VP of Finance to CFO roles, and to CEO roles. So I've kind of seen a lot.
You've run the gamut for sure.
Yeah,
You've seen just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, and then today, give us a little idea about what your role looks like, the
Right.
span of control you have there,
Right.
and just Cornerstone on Demand in general, and like what that business model looks like, what kind of challenges
Right.
you guys are up against.
Yeah, so Cornerstone On Demand has been around for a number of years. We were actually a public company in most of the 2010 onward, before they were taken private by Clearlake back in 21, I believe, right? And they're in the workforce agility software space, right? They're the leader of the quadrant, a very excellent tech stack in terms of the services they provide to organizations to help them grow and develop talent, and also manage all the compliance elements related to talent pool skills and all the state and local requirements that are needed depending on the industry that you're in. So my role there as SVP Finance, I basically run the CFO stack of work. So I have FP&A, I have all of the accounting, corporate, domestic, international, tax, treasury, transformation, and I think that's it. And I got a shared service also in India, so it's around about 175 people total.
I love that's it.
Yeah. So again, a little bit bigger enterprise, bigger teams, bigger engine to
Yeah.
move. And I think when you go from a startup player coach to kind of leading at scale, it's different skills required to kind of move the engine and move the environment. And I like the diversity in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I have talked a lot about, yes, the roles changing and modernizing, but we've also talked a lot about the tech stack and
Right.
the CFO tech stack and how that's starting to
Right.
also shift and change and modernize. There's so many different solutions out there, that sort of thing.
Right.
But how, like when you think about it, how
Yeah.
do you think of how that tech stack is sort of looking like today and how is it shifting?
Yeah, it's shifting fast, right? Prior, as early as maybe 3, 4 years ago, your tech stack hasn't really changed for over the years. You had new tools come in, right? But it's sort of you get an ERP system, you get an HR system, you get a payroll and whatnot, and then it all kind of flows into a data warehouse, then it kind of flows into some sort of reporting tool. And everyone kind of managed teams to kind of validate the data coming out of those tools, right? And I think with the emergence of AI and the emergence of the role, right, is shifting, because now what you're introducing is AI agents into these sort of services that feed into a close, right? So if you think about bookkeeping, payroll, AP, AR, inventory, if you're manufacturing, right? If you think about stock comp, like each one of these boxes, you could have an AI agent doing a lot of that work, right? And I think the companies that are stepping back, you're seeing a lot of companies now in that CFO stack that are emerging all over the place. AI driven this, AI driven that, because they kind of service a block of that engine, right? And then you got another series of AI companies that are on the flip side doing all the reporting, right? Becoming insightful, taking all that data and then analyzing it to give you insights to what's really driving the business. So when you kind of reconfigure that tech stack, me coming in, whether you're the CFO, CAO, a mix of both, right? You're kind of looking at, okay, how do I augment the team to take advantage of this new technology and be able to scale a team with maybe less people, right? Where you have data sort of confirmed and relied upon, so you can have more people doing analysis and making sure it's all right. And I think that's going to be a transition, because underlying it all, to kind of finish the thought, is none of it works unless your data is clean. And I think one of the learnings, and you learn through every transformation, I've been doing them now for a while, every transformation is a learning. But one consistent thing that you will find is if your data is not clean, right, you're going to spend a lot of time in any transition cleaning data, right? Either pre-go live or post-go live. And they're equally as painful, right? And the other learning I have, which is a harder thing to do, is really pin down your management team as to, okay, how do they want to run the business? What are the key KPIs? What are the key metrics? And you can't have 50 of them, right? People don't have that brain capacity, right? You probably need 3 to 5 if you're good, maybe a little bit more to really understand what actually drives your business. And if you're really clear on those metrics, then cleaning up your tech stack, getting the reporting aligned, getting the whole org to align behind it becomes a much simpler effort because it's more focused, right?
Yeah.
A lot of experience I have was, here's what we currently do. We want to do the same thing, but now with a new tool, right? Which in today's world with all this AI engineering, it can't work that way. You almost have to throw what you currently do out the door, look at the tool, and then redefine the process to make the tool efficient for you while still getting the checks you need in terms of data integrity, completeness, accuracy, and being able to surpass an audit if you're on the accounting side.
You're spot on there. I think so often I see teams trying to simply automate what it is they do today in the same fashion, but it's funny, those steps need to be taken today because of the manual nature of it. If you're automating it, think about what your ultimate outcome is and be able to build for that ultimate outcome. I agree wholeheartedly. The other thing you mentioned, data.
Yeah.
I'd love to double click on that, the age-old double click. But it's something that's coming up in every single conversation. AI, data, your data needs to be clean. Everybody says it needs to be clean. Everybody wants it to be clean, but how have you helped your teams actually attack that?
It's not easy. And I think, and the challenge, there's 3 challenges, right? The first challenge is, and this is, for season, for the CEOs, even CFOs that are running or executive sponsoring this thing, right? The first thing is to get people aligned to why this system is needed, what's the value it can bring, why is it important, why is accounting compliance, tax compliance, pick a venue, why is this needed, right? And convincing people this actually is a value add and helps the organization going forward for various reasons. So once you get through that, then the second question when it comes to data, then you got to basically pick apart your data. You got the customer card, right? Example, Best Buy PLC, Best Buy Inc., BBY, right? I've witnessed and I've seen where one customer could have 4 different names in the system. And then when someone says, oh, give me the total for this customer, right? If your parent-child relationships aren't aligned, you're going to get 5 different numbers, right? But now at scale, try to homogenize that, right? And get that all lined up. And then most people are entering into environments where tech stack already exists. It's not like you're a complete startup with no data, right? That's a different avenue, right? But if you're coming in with an already established tech stack, right? Now it's cleanup. It's organization cleanup. It's alignment on what you want your customer card to look like. Move away from customer, go into product card. SKUs. How many SKUs do you have? Are they accurate? Are they valid, right? And clean up SKUs, right? Who works on these SKUs? What products are these, right? How does it align to what you're selling, right? So when you start going through all that, then you get into customer contracts and whatnot. It's an effort. And where I have not had the luxury or privilege to be in is where you have a year's time to first clean up the data, then do a system implementation. So what winds up happening is it all gets done all around the same time. And then people put their bodies at it, right? And there are a lot of good consulting companies out there to help you do that. That's their business model. And, and then they go painstakingly ask all these questions that the implementation team doesn't really know how to answer because they have to go up to the exec team about, okay, what is it that you want? So the more experience you have in understanding the pitfalls of any implementation, the better off you are, at least starting off on the right foot with the right alignment. And your biggest and most favored partner in all of this is your IT team. Be friends with the IT, right? Because they're, you're in that sort of race where, one's left leg and one's right leg are tied and you're kind of walking down the field, right? You're tied to IT, right?
Mhm.
And IT is tied to you. And the better clarity you have on your requirements, your use cases, what you're testing, the more success you'll have in the final output of a go live.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that you and I have spoken about in the past is integrations. And I think that's another area where having that close cross-functional relationship with IT is so critical, is understanding the integrations piece and taking into consideration the existing tech stack, and then ultimately where you want to go with that tech stack and what else you might want to plug into it. What are some insights around that? I know you have lots of thoughts around the integration piece.
You know, the four-letter word in any implementation is MVP, minimal viable product, right? You know, let's get something out of the box. And most businesses are not cookie cutter out of the box businesses. There's always some level of customization, right? And so when you start looking at integrations, I do think there is value in understanding the future needs and whether or not you need all the software tools you once had into the new stack. I think, you know, picking an integrator, you know, Boomi or some other, you know, element can be, you know, more efficient, but you really have to understand what it is you're trying to achieve as the output, like, of this transformation, to really understand what needs integration versus not. And where MVP becomes problematic is you integrate half of the information you need from a data stack, and then what winds up happening is you got a system that gives you half what you need, and then you got to have a bunch of bodies to go fill in the other half manually, or manually go back in the system to change it to get you what you need. Or what's happened a lot is you get what you get out of the system, and then everyone downloads it through a CSV file into Excel, and then Excel becomes the source of truth because you got to do all this manual manipulation around it. You want to avoid that, especially now with AI being what it's turning into. There's ways to probably make that more efficient, as long as AI is being fed complete data.
Absolutely. Without that completeness, you've only got a piece of the puzzle or part of the story. And you're right. Then it just goes it throws us right back into manual work and all of that. So as you go through figuring out, do you want to do something with your existing tech stack? Do you want a point solution to work with it? How do you think about what's necessary versus maybe like a nice to have? Like, how do you go through and sort of think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you have an existing tech stack, it's not a complete rip and replace, right? Because it's not just an ERP. ERP touches so many systems, right? And then you got the whole, you know, front office support departments that feed into it, that you can't just rip and replace. I think the way I've approached it, and what I hear other leaders talk about, you know, this new environment is, you know, start small, right? And what I'm trying to do here at Cornerstone is I'm trying to get my team go through this AI journey, right? Not with the intent of I want to replace a bunch of systems, but understand for each, you know, AR, AP, payroll, GL, stock comp, commissions, right? Pick a category. Okay, let's look at some companies out there that are AI centric, AI driven, and let's demo them. You know, how does that tool work? And then from there, once you kind of educate yourself on what's actually out there, then the question is internally, what do you do manually? The biggest use case that you might have is, do you have a manual process that can be automated, right? So then you can take a sliver of something, get assistance through an AI tool or software, and then automate that. That kind of can feed into an existing ERP, and start small that way, right? And you can find efficiencies. You know, AI is not cheap. You know, software costs you money, right? There's also a development time period and implementation time period. But if you can prove out the use case, then start small and just continue over a period of time, you know, developing an AI strategy of how you convert your existing tech stack into a more AI-driven stack, right? And it's sort of, you know, you're not replacing all the parts in the car all at once. You know, you're starting to change a tire, right? Change the seats, right? Then get into the engine, put in a bigger battery, right?
Feels a little more safe or a little less
Well,
risky.
it's
And I think
measured. It's,
we're just,
it's
yeah,
measured
yeah.
because the last thing you want to do is implement something that's not complete or accurate. And then if you have audit responsibilities or tight
Hmm.
closes and you can't close the books, that's a world of hurt, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Exactly.
start
Exactly.
small. And I think organizations that are not in the AI business itself of selling software in AI, but I think organizations buying it, I think internally there's a learning curve there to be had as well. Because a
Yeah.
lot of senior leaders are also learning this as well, right? And no one's going to take a big bite up front. So
Yeah.
pick a use case, sell it, prove its effectiveness, get people confident with it, then do another one.
Yeah.
I was actually at a I was actually at a seminar that had both the CFO of Visa and the CFO of Adobe talk
Hmm.
about their AI journey. Now, when you start talking about companies like that, multi-billion-dollar companies, right? They have the luxury of putting together a SWAT team, right? Do a bunch of hackathons, figure out some potential use cases, put a SWAT team
Hmm.
on a sandbox and prove out the use case, right?
Right.
And for every five that they do, maybe one wins, right?
Hmm.
And then they put that into production, right? For companies at that scale, if you're working for companies at that scale, if you're not doing that, that might be an avenue for you if you have the time, budget, and resources to dedicate that. For other companies who don't have that scale, right? You got to make strategic bets as
Hmm.
I converge. This is the value it could bring. This is the ROI. Whether it's ROI in terms of I could save headcount, or I could provide efficiency, improve close timing. I can scale without adding more heads, right? So whatever the case may be, AI will definitely be leverageable to help you scale, with volume.
Yeah. I think, the Visas of the world, that is fabulous. If and the
Right,
Adobes, if they
right,
have those resources,
right,
that's fabulous. A lot of us do not, but I
right,
think a lot of folks are taking that more piecemeal approach, we'll call
yeah,
it, just
right,
testing along the way, a little bit here, a little bit there. But a lot
right,
of those little improvements can
right,
make a world of difference and then starts to really change the way in which we work. And I
right,
think, to that extent, actually, I'd love to ask about you kind of mentioned, the way that our teams are working is shifting.
right,
So the skills then, right, around what you are hiring for are also probably going to change because you don't
right,
necessarily need the same skill set or maybe the same approaches to everything.
right.
Curious if that's already shifting what you're looking for in hires or how you're thinking about putting your team together. Maybe it's a little more future looking.
Yeah, I think it depends on the scale of your company and what roles you're looking for. I find that the younger generation coming out of school, right, are more data savvy,
Hmm.
right? Right. They're more up to, AI data is not a foreign object to them, right?
Yeah.
They use
Yeah.
it in school. They adopt it in their day-to-day lives. They're more comfortable with navigating all the tools. And so when you're looking at, hiring, associate, middle level, managers, they could bring that tech stack and that functionality to an org, right?
Yeah.
Which helps improve efficiency because they work smarter, not harder, right?
Hmm.
I think when you start looking at leaders, right? Call that director, VPs, SVPs, whatnot, right? You want leaders that one is you're still managing teams. You're
Yeah.
still managing relationships. You're still trying to develop people, right? So you need people that can bring leadership skills to an org and be able to
Hmm.
communicate up and down the chain and bring now a modern view, if I use that term, of how a tech stack can augment, improve, and add value to an existing org, and
Hmm.
skill set to convince others as to the why, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
think, and I think, people that embrace this new environment are going to be better off in the future, adapting to change, learning more, and after they get through their initial introduction to the space,
Mm-hmm.
when, you fast forward 5 years from now, it'll be like second nature. Kind of like,
Yeah.
people who grew up with the same tech stack for the last 15 years, you kind of know all the tools out there, you kind of know what works, what doesn't, and you become really proficient at it. You're going to see
Mm-hmm.
efficiency in these AI tools, over the next 5, 10 years. And there'll be consolidation in that space. They're already, everyone's already starting to eat everybody else's lunch in
Yeah.
terms of capability, right? Because it's just moving
Yeah.
so fast, right?
It's wild to think of a world in which AI didn't exist already. It's
Right.
funny. I remember when I brought my kids to an office once and they saw a telephone, like a corded telephone, and not
Right.
just a typical, cell
Right.
phone. And they were like, what is that? And I
Yeah.
didn't even realize they didn't know what a corded
Oh,
telephone
yeah.
looked like. So there's going to be a world in which people are like, oh, you didn't use AI for that, which is mind blowing, but we're probably closer to it than we think.
Right.
Around that, there's this growing conversation around, as we've talked about, right? Data keeps coming in, but
Yep.
there's this idea around maybe like chief data officer. So
Right.
not something we
Yep.
hear a lot of, but like finance leaders are kind of taking on that role. They're kind of owning
Yep.
and driving data strategy
Right.
because they're ultimately the holders of this data and they need it to be able to perform all the functions that we have. Talk to me a little bit about that and how you
Sure.
kind of like think about finance owning and driving that.
Yeah, and that concept's been around now for the last couple of years. Chief data officer, data czar,
And data czar, I like that.
right? The way I think about it is, in finance, you have access to a lot of information, right? A lot, especially a lot of financial information, right? And if you're in the accounting space, right, chief accounting officer, controller, all data leads to you because you got to account for it one way, shape, or another. Okay. And most controllers, right, and chief accounting officers, right, kind of build pathways to funnel that data, make sure every transaction kind of gets to accounting in one way, shape, or form through their teams. It gets vetted. There's review hierarchy, right? That's why anything going into a GL has a preparer reviewer. If you're public, you got all the SOX requirements because you're checking the integrity of that data. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start thinking about a data officer, it's not so much, it's in addition to, right? It's in addition to taking all that data that goes through accounting into a report, analyzing it, providing insights, making connections in terms of what's driving the business. But I also think, like, when you think about a data officer, it's also understanding data hierarchy, right? And when you get into data hierarchy, it's a concept I learned along the way of how your data is labeled, right?
Mm-hmm.
How it maps, right? And how it connects to all the systems, right? And so when
Mm-hmm.
you get into, again, customer card, product card, right? And you get into volume, right? Understanding your data hierarchy, how, whether you group it by an alphanumeric, a numeric code, whatever it is, you want somebody to ensure, like, if something new's coming in, right, through a pricing committee because you got a new product, right, through a new customer acquisition, through a new vendor, like it gets tagged consistently and it gets mapped
Mm-hmm.
consistently, and it flows through the system in a funnel that starts. Here's the list of your 10,000 customers. It gets funneled to a 5,000 subset, 3,000 subset, 2,000. Eventually, it winds up in a one line item in a P&L, right? That management of that data, right, requires oversight, requires
Mm-hmm.
communication, requires alignment, requires a set of rules and guidelines as to how things are entered into a system. So that's another
Mm-hmm.
element when I think about a data officer, because someone has to own the hierarchy. Otherwise, the hierarchy is unstructured. It goes into a system unstructured. And when it comes out, it's unstructured, what we deem garbage in, garbage out. And then you have a bunch of probably accountants at the back end of it running Excels to clean it all up, right?
Yeah.
And this also
Yeah.
probably explains, right, for those that are in FP&A and running, departmental finance teams, why outside accounting and FP&A, when they produce numbers, the org has different numbers, because they upload different stuff into Tableau, right? Or some other reporting tool. And then all of a sudden now their revenue numbers are different than yours, or their expense numbers are different than yours. And I know from experience that really confuses CEOs, right?
It's
So
the
you need
great
somebody to manage.
reconciliation mess that
Yeah,
happens all
everyone
the
should be
time.
everyone should be grounded to source of truth, and the numbers should be the same.
Could
So
not agree more. Could not agree
but that's
more.
an effort. That's a cost. That's a lift. That is hard work.
And who wants to truly own it? Like everybody
Right.
wants to be able to make the change and
Right.
drive the change, but that's a hard one to own.
I think, you know, when you think about like, you know, like this environment, we have the CFO world, the CAO world, everyone's kind of up leveling, right?
Mhm.
Where, you know, 5, 10, 15 years ago, the CFO was the keeper of numbers, accuracy of numbers, here's what's happened. Now that role is kind of moved into an operational strategic role, right?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of CFOs become COOs, right?
Hmm.
You heard about this concept of a COFO, right? Chief Operating
Yep.
Financial Officer, right? And to fill that void, right, got probably people like me who go from CAO into, you know, finance, CFO role, right? Bridging what a CFO role did like, you know, 5 years ago, right?
Exactly.
And so when you see that shift, right, where the COO can have some influences, recognizing that data is important, the structure and hierarchy and cleanliness of that data is a value add to the organization because you get cleaner data faster, able to make decisions, better data to make better bets on your strategic investments. And if you invest in that with the proper governance and oversight, you know, the organization could be better off for it, right?
Yeah.
But people got to see the value in that investment. People got to see the value in, you know, going through a transformation of not a system transformation, but a data one, right?
Yeah.
And then recognizing I'm going to need X amount of dollars to do that.
Mm-hmm. But I think that outcome, back to what you said originally,
Right.
right? Like being tied down to what that outcome is that you want, the 3 to 5 KPIs, don't kill yourself
Yeah.
with
Right.
50 different KPIs and drown in the data. I think
Right.
that's really, when you break it down like that, it seems
Right.
much more doable than sometimes I think we maybe give
Right.
it credit for, but spot on. I love it. Okay. I would love a rapid fire round with you.
Okay. All right.
Three questions. You ready for
Sure.
this? They're not too
Sure.
hard.
Okay.
I
All
make
right.
it sound more scary than it is.
Yeah.
All right. One skill that you think every finance leader should master that's often overlooked.
The ability to explain complex things in simple terms, right?
Look at that,
I
like you just
I
did. I love
I
it.
think I you know, to elaborate on that, in the profession, you get to know the detail. You're in
Mm.
it, right? You know your numbers, right? If you don't know your numbers, you probably shouldn't be doing the role you're doing,
Yeah,
right?
you're probably not
And
in the right job.
right? And what happens is when people ask you questions at the exec level, right? Because now you're managing up, not down, right? You got to be able to understand what the key message is of those numbers, right? And how to articulate that in a clear, concise manner so people understand the bigger point versus regurgitating the model behind the numbers. And I think that's a transition, especially for new controllers and people like getting into the role for the first time, because what got them there was understanding the numbers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then people ask you, okay, why did this account go up, or why did this happen? What's happening here? They tend to kind of tell people what they know, but
Mm-hmm.
what you got to step out into is really understanding that driver, the business impact, and you got to understand what the audience is actually asking, and you need at bats at that. So the more you can master, you know, your communication, clear, concise, brevity is probably better, the more effective you will be.
I think we can all take a page from that book
Yeah.
because
Right.
I
Yeah.
think, as finance professionals, I think we
Yeah.
tend to just get right down into the details.
Yeah.
Perfect. I
Right.
love that. I love that.
Right.
Okay, next one.
Yeah.
All-time favorite accounting tool.
Uh,
This
all
can go
time.
back to like calculator if you want, but I don't
You
think that's your
know,
favorite.
well, it's funny when you say about an accounting tool, right? The more recent accounting tool that I've embraced that actually adds a lot of value to me was clarity, right?
Mm, yeah.
Um, right? Because it helped me augment, my rev rec review, right? It helped me make sure what's in the contract is actually what's in my system, right?
Yep.
And the way they designed that tool, and they got other products as well, but that tool in particular, right? Then you can save yourself a lot of time and heartache, manual looking at contracts to make sure it's in the system, and the tool runs a compare to make sure it all aligns, right? So
Yeah.
that's like new AI kind of a tool, but I'm probably sad to say it at my level too. I also kind of embraced the whole Excel as the accounting tool because I run reports from other systems into Excel because then I do my own analysis around that. And I'm trying to challenge myself in that as well, because now there are other financial reporting tools out there. Like there's Sapient comes to mind as one.
Mm-hmm.
They can take, your existing data set and then provide that insight. So as you educate yourself as to what tools are out there that takes current data, analyzes it, and gives you insights through AI, I think I'm trying to get educated in that space as well, because I think that's also where this thing is heading. So so my brain is augmented by AI to help me manage volume of data among multiple reports.
I love it. Your accounting tools didn't necessarily even equal an actual accounting tool, but tools to help accountants, which I love. So that's exactly the point of AI and all of these things. So that's great. Okay, last question. If you weren't in accounting, what would you be doing?
Um, I have the personality to be in sales.
Yes, you do. I love that.
I probably would have tried sales. I'm very good with customers, and I understand the sales effort is not an easy effort. When you really understand sales, right? It's not all glamour, right? The strategy behind who to sell, how to sell, what to sell, how do you extract value in what you're selling, get people to recognize it. I think the real good ones do that, make it look easy, right?
Yeah.
Right. Just like, I always tell my team from an accounting side, it's very hard to make an accounting process look easy and seamless. There's a lot of work to make it sound like, oh, this works like butter, because of all the pieces that go into it to make it appear that way. Same thing with good salespeople, to make it look easy, but it's a lot of hard work. But I think, if I wasn't really good at accounting, I think I could have probably tried sales and maybe been equally successful. But
hey, never say never. You don't know. Maybe the basis that you have will make you the best salesperson ever.
Yeah, no, I wish I had the talent for professional sports, but that
don't
would
we
be
all?
I don't know if that would have qualified for the question.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Nick G, thank you so much for joining me
Well, thank you
today.
for having me on.
How can listeners connect with you if they want to learn more?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's
Perfect.
probably the best way. Yeah.
The easiest way for us. I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Likewise.
And thank you to Hubify for sponsoring the Accounting on Automation podcast and supporting the OTTO-MATES community. If you are looking for help with Stripe accounting automation or high volume revenue recognition, you can visit hubify.com. Thanks so much. And thanks again, Nick.
Thank you.